Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hide the darkest secrets. Tonight's story comes from a listener who shared a tale about two sisters, a witch's cottage, and a betrayal that led to a chilling revenge. This is the story of Sweetbread. The two sisters had always been close. The older one was protective, always looking out for her younger sibling, who had a heart as soft as, well, Sweetbread. But their lives took a dark turn when their father remarried. Their stepmother was cruel, and one day she made a decision that would change everything. She led the sisters deep into the woods, to a cottage that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Its walls were made of sweetbread, its windows glazed with sugar. But this was no fairy tale. The old woman who lived there was a witch, and she had plans for the sisters' plans that involved an oven and a terrible fate. The older sister managed to outsmart the witch, trapping her in the oven instead. But the younger sister, she wasn't the same after that. She cried as they escaped the cottage. Her fingers burned from holding the oven door shut. Her tears were the last sign of the soft-hearted girl she used to be. As they made their way back through the woods, the older sister noticed something strange. Her younger sister seemed different. She moved with a strange confidence, as if the forest itself was guiding her. And when they finally returned home, the younger sister's eyes had grown colder than the darkest winter night. Their father was overjoyed to see them, but his relief was short-lived. Their stepmother had fallen ill, and the younger sister insisted on seeing her. She knelt beside the woman's bed, her voice soft and soothing as she fed her a potion from one of the witch's vials. The stepmother recovered almost instantly, but the older sister couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That evening, the younger sister offered to make dinner. She baked sweetbread, drizzling it with honey, and served it to their parents with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The older sister sat frozen, her stomach churning as she watched her parents eat. It wasn't long before the first cough echoed through the room. The stepmother was the first to realize what was happening. She choked, her face twisting in horror as she stared at the younger sister. "You, little witch," she gasped, before collapsing to the floor. The father followed soon after, his pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. The younger sister watched them die with an expression as cold as ice. When it was over, the sisters left the house, their bags filled with the witch's treasure. The older sister was trembling, her heart torn between love and fear for her sibling. "You're afraid," the younger sister said, her voice soft but chilling. "You don't need to be. I'll protect you." The older sister realized then that her sibling's heart wasn't soft anymore. It was as deadly as the poisoned sweetbread she had served their parents. And as they disappeared into the night, she couldn't help but wonder, had the witch truly died in that oven? Or had a part of her lived on, twisting the younger sister into something far more dangerous? The sisters were never seen again. Some say they vanished into the forest, guided by the whispers of the trees. Others claim they found a new home, far from the horrors of their past. But one thing is certain. If you ever find yourself lost in the woods and you smell the sweet, cloying scent of baking bread, run, because the younger sister's heart may be soft, but her vengeance is as cold as the grave. It all began on a cold, moonlit night. the kind of night where the air feels heavy and every shadow seems to move on its own. The listener, a young woman we'll call Betty, had just done something unthinkable. She had dug up her best friend's grave. Her friend, Adeline, had died tragically just weeks before. The official cause of death was suffocation, but the details were far more horrifying. Adeline had been caught in a house fire started by a group of boys who claimed it was just a prank gone wrong. By the time Adeline crawled out of the burning house, it was too late. She died on the pavement, her Sunday dress singed, her body broken. Betty couldn't let go. She couldn't accept that Adeline was gone. So she did the unthinkable. She went to the graveyard, shovel in hand, and dug up her best friend's coffin. When Bet opened the coffin, she found Adeline inside. Her body was pale and cold, but strangely intact. Bet didn't know what she was expecting, but it wasn't this. She lifted Adeline's body into her car and drove home, her mind racing with a mix of guilt, grief, and something else she couldn't quite name. As she drove, Adeline's body began to move. Her left eye slipped from its socket, and she casually pushed it back in with the heel of her hand. She turned to Bet and smiled, her voice strained but eerily calm. "Sorry, baby. I wasn't expecting company. I'm sure you understand." Betty couldn't respond. She just kept driving, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. When they got home, Betty helped Adeline inside. She sat her on the sofa, trying to act normal, as if this was just another night. But nothing about this was normal. Adeline was dead. And yet, there she was, sitting in Betty's living room, her skin glistening like wet plastic under the dim light. Bet made tea, her hands shaking as she poured the water. She brought it to Adeline, sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of her. They drank in silence, the tea spilling from the gaping hole in Adeline's chest, pooling on the floor. "Do I disgust you?" "Number no more than I always did." But Betty couldn't bring herself to look at Adeline. Not really. And Adeline knew it. Later that night, Betty lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Adeline sat on the edge of the bed, her back to Bet, her hands fidgeting with the sheets. The room was silent, except for the hum of the radiator. "Why am I here, Betty?" "What's it for?" Betty didn't answer. Adeline turned to her, her eyes slipping again. She pushed it back in, her voice trembling. "You can only love me when I'm not here, when there's nothing left to love." Betty finally looked at her, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't tell anyone." "Who could I tell? I'm not really here." Betty reached out, taking Adeline's hand. She buried her face in the crook of Adeline's neck, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Adeline stroked her hair, her touch cold and lifeless. By dawn, Adeline was gone. Betty stood in the doorway, watching as her best friend walked down the dirt road, her figure fading into the mist. Betty clutched the shovel in her hands, her face a mask of guilt and sorrow. It started like any other morning. Rachel woke up late, her alarm snoozed twice, and reached for her husband's side of the bed. But Mark was already gone, off to work, leaving her alone in their quiet apartment. Rachel dragged herself out of bed, her body aching from the cold October air, and shuffled into the kitchen to make coffee. It was a routine she'd done 1,000 times before, but this time something was different. As she prepared her coffee, Rachel began to hear a strange noise. At first, it was just a faint buzz, like the hum of a distant appliance. But as she went through the motions, grabbing a mug, inserting the K-cup, pressing the brew button, the buzzing grew louder. It became a low, droning sound that seemed to fill the room. And then she felt it. A presence. Something was watching her. Rachel spun around, her heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the empty kitchen, the locked front door, and the sound of her own breathing. She tried to shake it off, chalking it up to exhaustion or stress. But as the day went on, the drone kept coming back. It followed her from room to room, growing louder each time. And with it came the feeling of being watched, hunted, as if something was closing in on her. Rachel tried to focus on her work, burying herself in the monotony of medical billing. But the drone was relentless. It drowned out her music, filled her lungs, and made her feel like she was suffocating. At one point, she even thought she saw something in her reflection, a shadowy figure staring back at her from the computer screen. But when she turned around, there was nothing there. By lunchtime, Rachel was on edge. She hesitated to leave her office, afraid of what she might encounter in the kitchen. But hunger eventually won out, and she made her way to the fridge. As she heated up leftovers, the drone returned, louder than ever. It seemed to come from the office, creeping closer and closer to the kitchen door. Rachel froze, her hands shaking as the sound grew deafening. She could feel it in her bones, a cold, oppressive force that made her want to scream. And then it stopped. The microwave beeped, snapping Rachel back to reality. She was alone in the kitchen, the drone gone as quickly as it had come. But the fear lingered, a heavy weight in her chest. She abandoned her lunch and retreated to her office, locking the door behind her. She told herself it was just her imagination, a trick of her mind. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. The rest of the day was a blur. Rachel tried to work, but the drone kept coming back, each time louder and more menacing than the last. It felt like it was taunting her, playing with her, as if it knew she was powerless to stop it. By mid-afternoon, Rachel was a wreck. She sat huddled in the corner of her office, tears streaming down her face as the drone reached a deafening crescendo. Something was slamming against the door, trying to get in. Rachel closed her eyes, convinced she was about to die. And then she heard Mark's voice. "Rachel, are you okay?" Rachel screamed at him to leave, to lock the door behind him, to save himself. But Mark didn't listen. He found her in the office, trembling and sobbing, and held her until the fear began to fade. He explained that Rachel had been hallucinating, a side effect of her recent medication change. It made sense. Rachel had schizophrenia, and her psychiatrist had warned her that lowering her dosage could trigger an episode. Relieved, Rachel let Mark comfort her, grateful that the nightmare was over. But as they sat together on the couch that evening, watching television and trying to forget the horrors of the day, Rachel heard it again. The drone. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. She glanced at Mark, hoping he wouldn't notice. But then he turned to her, his face pale, and asked the one question she'd been dreading. "Did you hear that?" Rachel's blood ran cold. If Mark could hear it too, then it wasn't a hallucination. Something was in the apartment with them, and it wasn't going away.